The UAE is sending the Arab world's first mission to the moon, a new space milestone for a country that hasn't looked back after sending the first Emirati astronaut into space in 2019. Rashid rover is flying on SpaceX's Falcon 9 rocket from Cape Canaveral in Florida. You're listening to Beyond the Headlines. I'm your host, Suhail Akram. This week, we're looking at the build-up to the launch of the Rashid rover and the legacy it will leave behind for the UAE's space mission. We will also take a look back at some of the major space milestones of the UAE. Let's first go to Space Coast, Florida, where our correspondent Sarwat Nasir has been camping to cover the launch. We asked her what the mood on the ground was like.
There's actually been a lot of excitement in the air for this mission. It is the Arab world's first mission to the moon. So there's about more than 30 employees from the Mohammed bin Rashid Space Center that have come down for this launch, as well as a lot of staff from iSpace, who have developed the lander to launch the rover to the moon. And the rocket was rolled out from the SpaceX building, and it was raised into a vertical position for the launch. There were quite a lot of people that turned out for the rocket rollout, and you could see a lot of excited faces and a lot of people who were really looking forward to the launch. And I think it's going to be quite exciting when the rocket lifts off, and a lot of people are going to be watching from the UAE, from the Middle East.
The SpaceX's Falcon 9 rocket carrying the Rashid rover was expected for a launch on 30th November from Florida's Cape Canaveral space station. But due to bad weather, the launch has since been postponed.
The weather here has been really good for launches the past week. The week before, it was quite bad. It was wet and cold, and it was unsuitable for a launch. This week, it improved significantly. And with the coming days, the weather also looks good. I'm here on the Space Coast right now. And let me tell you, there's been a Falcon 9 rocket launch almost every week. I was just laying on my bed. It was late at night here last week. And I knew that Falcon 9 had a launch, but it was terrible weather conditions, so I thought it might not go off. But it was about, I think, 10:30 or 11 p.m., and I was about to fall asleep. And then suddenly I hear this loud, almost thunder-like noise, and it just grew louder. And, for a second I thought, hey, it's very bad thunder. But no, as the noise grew louder, you could tell it was sort of like the Merlin engines of Falcon 9. And it was like, it literally shook all my windows, and it rattled my door. And, it would wake anybody up. So it's pretty cool to see SpaceX almost having like a shuttle service to space that goes every week. And it's good to see the UAE taking advantage of that as well.
So what is Rashid rover all about? Well, first its name. The rover is named in honor of late Sheikh Rashid Al Saeed, the former ruler of Dubai and the father of Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid, vice president and ruler of Dubai. The Rashid rover has 4 wheels and weighs 10 kilograms. It's built by engineers from Mohammed bin Rashid Space Center. A core team of 11 experts were behind the mission's development and have been working on it since 2017. They hope the rover will land on the moon's near side, the one that faces the Earth, to study an unexplored region. The Rashid rover is hitching a ride on Hakuto or Mission 1 lander, built by Japanese company iSpace. The rover is equipped with a propulsion and navigation system that allows it to power through space and land safely with its cargo. We spoke to Salim Humaid Al-Murri, Director General of Mohammed bin Rashid Space Center, or MBRSC. He spoke to us from Florida.
Rashid rover actually is quite an interesting story, how we decided to kick off this project. And, what we do at the Mohammed bin Rashid Space Center is we have quite large teams, numbering in the hundreds, who are working on very large projects over a long period of time. So you'd say something like MBZsat or KhalifaSat or the Mars mission is, 5, 6, 7 years development. And as I said, hundreds of people working on that. So we decided to try to find a way to get smaller teams to work on innovative projects in a shorter cycle. So we opened a lab. We placed it originally in the higher colleges of technology in Dubai, and then we put it in Silicon Oasis. And we took 10 to 15 people, which is the Rashid rover team, and placed them there and gave them a bit of freedom to innovate and come up with ideas to to really push forward and give us something unique to go with. And what came out of that was the team started working on different projects that eventually turned into Rashid rover. And of course, you face a lot of challenges trying to develop a project in that way. Looking at the science, of course, going to a new area that we haven't been to before, and looking at trying to conduct unique science was also challenging, and we cooperated internationally. Today we have the CNES, French Space Agency, on board with us with 3 payloads. We have universities from Denmark and different areas in Europe also participating in the science, and we have some unique science coming from the UAE. So I think altogether, it's a short cycle project compared to our previous projects, so about 2 years, and very innovative, but lots of challenges.
The rover will study the properties of lunar soil, the petrography and geology of the moon, dust movement, and study surface plasma conditions and the moon's photoelectron sheet. Salim says the rover will also study lunar dust, or regolith.
In layman's terms, basically, we're looking at the lunar regolith, which is the surface of the moon, so the moon dust or the moon rocks, and we have instruments that are imaging that. We have microscopes that are looking at the composition of the regolith. We also have strips of different materials on the wheels that we will see how the lunar regolith sticks to those materials to see, what best materials can be used for future astronaut suits or future missions, etc., so that the lunar dust doesn't stick to you. So these are the main elements that we're working on. There's also a payload which is looking at the charged particles on the surface of the moon, and that type of data we do not have. So looking at the electromagnetic charge of the moon's surface itself.
Once it makes a touchdown, the Rashid rover is expected to send thousands of images to the mission control in Dubai. But the launch is not the only challenge. Landing on the moon is no easy task, with 1/3 of missions failing. Only the United States, the former Soviet Union, and China have achieved soft landings on the lunar surface. Most recently, landers from India and Israel both crash-landed on the lunar surface.
Yeah, well, going to the moon is obviously always challenging. With this mission, we have built the rover. We have not built the lander. So the lander is from iSpace, a Japanese company. And the biggest challenge really is landing on the surface of the moon. And, traveling in relatively deep space all the way there and navigating correctly, choosing your launch site correctly. And hopefully, it's a one-shot chance. You don't get a second chance. So once you start your descent, pretty much you have to nail it. And if not, you'll end up crashing on the surface of the moon. So that's really the biggest challenge and the biggest fear. And, there's a 60% chance of that failing. So that's the biggest challenge there. But once, iSpace do get on the surface of the moon, inshallah, successfully, there is another challenge, of course, of placing our rover on the surface of the moon, and then, of course, operating under those very harsh conditions. So the temperatures are, very high. It's not an easy area to operate remotely. And, of course, such a small rover then has limited capabilities in terms of thermal protection and all of those elements. So surviving and thriving and conducting your science is going to be the second challenge for us. So quite exciting.
The UAE has started reaping rich rewards for all the hard work it has put into the space sector. The country sent the first Emirati astronaut, Hazza al-Mansouri, into space on 25th September 2019. It was followed by a successful launch of the UAE's Hope probe, the Arab world's first interplanetary mission, on 19 July 2020. Putting the UAE's Mars probe in orbit made UAE only the 5th country to do so after the US, the former Soviet Union, Europe, and India. And then in July 2021, the UAE added another feather to its cap. A young Emirati engineer, Noura Al-Matroushi, was introduced as part of the UAE space program, making her the first Arab female astronaut. 29-year-old Noura is a mechanical engineer who worked at Abu Dhabi's National Petroleum Construction Company before she was chosen on a glorious path of becoming the first Arab female astronaut. Here's her reaction when we spoke to her immediately after getting selected for the space program in 2021.
I think that me being selected as the first Arab female astronaut um, will lead the way to other girls who are interested in the space field, and it will inspire them to want to join this field. I feel excited. I feel prepared. I feel excited because I like to think of myself as a very adventurous person. I love the fact that I'll be put in situations I'm not used to. So I'll be pushed out of my comfort zone. I feel like that's very exciting. If I can do it, then you can do it too. And if no one has done it yet, then you just go ahead and be the first. Always set high goals and ambitions for yourself, because while you are shooting for the moon, even if you don't reach the moon, you are going to fall among the stars.
While on the face of it, these space milestones are purely scientific, at the core of it, the UAE is hoping that these steps will inspire future scientists and the next generation of the country. Here is Salim Al-Marri again.
The UAE space program is relatively new compared to the classic players. I mean, we're going on now 20 years, so we're not that new, but the major objective of the UAE space program is really to build up capabilities, to try and diversify the economy, to be a player in this field, to bring the Middle East into space exploration. So these are some of the major objectives behind it. We want to inspire youth of the region, youth of the UAE. We want to create high-tech jobs, smart jobs. We want people who are now studying at school to think that, if I go and study mechanical engineering, electrical, whatever it may be, or if I want to be a scientist, that ability is there because there's a very ambitious space program that will bring me in and take me in and train me, and if I want to be an astronaut, I can be an astronaut. If I want to train astronauts, I can do that. If I want to work on science of human spaceflight, I can do that. So, that's part of the main objectives. And what we've been doing previously is, of course, launching quite ambitious missions, but really focusing on how we can either learn through those missions or make sure that we develop. So going forward, today we have Rashid rover. It's a mission totally developed at the Mohammed bin Rashid Space Center. We now have also in a couple of months the launch of Sultan al-Niyadi, who will be the second astronaut, but he's going for a 6-month duration mission, which is the first time for people outside of the ISS or countries outside of the ISS partnership. So we'll be probably the 10th country to do that. And to do that, you need to have a very robust team, a strong science team, a strong operations team, because 6 months is a very long duration to be monitoring and tracking a human in space. And at the end of the year, we're going to launch MBZsat, which is really a culmination of all of the work that we've been doing at the last 20 years, which is today we are designing and developing these satellites, but now we are looking at local industry. So the likes of Strata and companies from Tawazun who are working in many different fields in the UAE, but we're focusing on them developing the components and the structures, the electronics and the cabling for the satellites itself.
And this brings us back to the launch of Rashid rover. It's not the first Emirati launch to take place outside the UAE. The reason is because the UAE does not yet have its own rocket industry. The Hope probe was carried by a rocket from Japan's Mitsubishi Heavy Industries, and the Rashid rover is carried by Hakuto or Mission 1 lander, developed, as Salim earlier said, by a private Japanese company, iSpace. We asked Salim if the UAE is looking to develop launch capabilities right here on the Emirati shores.
At MBRC, that is not in our strategy going forward. So I'd say in the next 10, 15, 20 years, we're not looking at that. Obviously, launching rockets is a very costly endeavor as well as a strong commitment. And it's not something that we are currently investing or looking at. So our focus really is on developing the missions, the science missions. Today, when you look at the market for launch, there are so many commercial providers that are coming up with very small rockets, medium and large rockets. Today, we're going to SpaceX and, they launch 1 or 2 a month, 3 a month. And, the launch environment or the launch market is very different than it was previously. So the question would arise is why would you want to make those very large investments when you have commercial providers there that are able to do that for you? Also, having a launch capability entails that you have a very large launch base and maintaining that. And that is not something that we are looking at currently at MBRC.
The UAE space mission, a sort of a rarity in the Arab world, has created a huge buzz, not just in the region, but across the world. In the last 2 decades or so, the news from the Middle East has often bordered on political tensions and conflicts. But the successes of the UAE space program have forced the world to take note. As the UAE looks beyond Mars and the Moon, where are we headed next as the country embarks on the new golden age of science and exploration for the Arab and the Muslim world? Salim Al Murri grew up in the United Arab Emirates and went on to head the Space Center that's charting new frontiers in space exploration. He says such milestones are important to uplift a nation and break stereotypes.
I think at the end of the day, the UAE and the region itself, you look at the World Cup in Qatar, you look at Expo, all of these things break stereotypes, as you said. But what I see personally is that we want to be part of the global space community. We as Arabs, as people from this region as well, do have that explorer gene, let's say. And for me personally, when we are launching missions to the moon or we are launching astronauts, that's all exploration. And there's an unknown there that maybe we'll find out something we didn't know. Maybe we'll learn something new. And that what we learn, if you look at the Mars mission, the data is all new. It's data that humanity didn't understand that about Mars or the Martian atmosphere before this mission was launched. So we are contributing to, let's say, the global scientific understanding of Mars. The same thing with the moon and the same thing with human spaceflight. So that exploration element, I think, is very important for the development of the nation, the development of the psyche of people, that we are part of this, we are doing this type of work. And that's part of what drives me as well, that unknown and potentially what we could discover through our work. I grew up in the UAE, studied in government schools, and I went to government universities in the UAE. And I think at the end of the day, for me, as an Emirati who grew up in this system, if we put in the work, if we put in the time, whether as Emiratis or as anybody living in the country, where we can do it, I think. And it doesn't matter where you're educated or what your level of language is, etc. If you have the drive, the passion, you can do it. And I think it's all about hard work. So for me, I think all of us here on a journey, if you look at the UAE in the past 50 years, we're all in a journey of developing the country. Every person is contributing in some way. And 10, 15 years, 20 years later, when I retire and I'm talking to my kids, I think an important element for me is what did you do to contribute to the development of the UAE, whether it's small or big. And every day that we're working, I think we are achieving small steps that contribute to the development of the country. And as you say, either bring pride or bring development, bring capabilities. That's really the way I look at it.
Thanks this week to Sarwat Nasir and Salim Humaid Al Murri. This is Beyond Headlines. If you want more episodes like this, hit subscribe on your favorite podcasting app. For all the latest on the UAE space program, visit thenationalnews.com. We were produced this week by Dua Farid, Arthur Edison, and Thomas Smith. I've been your host, Suhail Akram. Thanks for listening.